In January 2024, 3 months into the war, my friend Daniella Hellerstein took an office nobody wanted, a room in her front desk business center in Modi'in with no window, and turned it into a podcast studio. I told her at the time I thought she was crazy. At that time, there were maybe 1,000 Hebrew podcasts in this country. Today, there are more than 6,000, and a lot of them were recorded in her studio. She was never chasing a business. For Daniella, this is a mission. So this week on Defining Moments, I asked her what she saw before the rest of us did. We talk about what people are actually after when they walk in with an idea and a microphone. Some come to be heard for the first time, some to teach, and some to make sure a story is not lost. She tells remarkable stories about who has sat in this chair and about the people you run into in the hallway outside. We also get into the harder side. The same medium that finally let Israel speak for itself handed our worst critics their biggest platform. I asked her whether she would ever refuse to let someone record in her studio and where the line sits. Her answer on freedom of speech is not an easy one. And I asked her the question I cannot stop asking myself. My work is building community in Israel. Yet here I am with a microphone, potentially reaching more people in an hour than some rabbis reach in a month. And the people listening are not a community, not a kehilla. They are an audience. They owe each other nothing. So is the podcast what we are reaching for instead of a kehilla? And is it good enough? Daniella Hellerstein on Defining Moments with Rabbi David Fine. Welcome to the Defining Moments podcast with Rabbi David Fine. It's been a little bit of time since I recorded. But I'm very honored to be here today with Daniella Hellerstein, my longtime friend from our community. But more importantly today, I'm the owner of Front Desk, the business center that we're at now, and Beineinu Studios, where we're sitting presently. So you're often in the background in terms of making podcasts happen. And how do you feel about sitting in this seat right now?
Not so comfortable.
You're always telling people
Even
that.
though you're a wonderful host, and I'm sure you'll make me feel very at home. And I do already feel at home. I spend a lot of time in this room, but usually on the other side of the camera where I'm very happy, watching, listening.
So before we get into the meat of the issue, I was telling you when I came in that I saw recently an ad that the celebrations are starting for the 30th anniversary of Modi'in. You've been here for most of that time. When did you move to Modi'in?
So we are in a few days celebrating our 25th Aliyah anniversary. And
you moved straight to Modi'in.
We moved straight to Modi'in.
Right.
One of the first, I could name probably 2 or 3 other families that made Aliyah straight to Modi'in before us.
What year was that?
2001. August 2001, the height of the Second Intifada, a few weeks before, a week before the Sbarro bombing, a few weeks before 9/11. It was a very difficult time to be here.
Right.
It was a year before Nefesh B'Nefesh, so we really
And what have you noticed in terms of what's happened here in Modi'in from that day until today?
Wow. I mean, where to begin, David? Even in the time that you've been here,
we've been here for 18 years in August.
The changes are incredible.
Right.
I mean, there's the citywide changes, basically what we have in terms of shopping and trains and transportation and parks and museums and culture and you name it. And then certainly in our community, which we built basically from scratch. When I came to Modi'in, it was like an empty dirt hilltop, nothing. So the fact that it's turned into such a thriving community and there's so much demand for people to live there.
Too much demand, I think.
If there is such a thing. But
it makes the values of the houses go up.
Exactly. No, I think, first of all, it means you built something people want to be a part of.
That's a very good way of looking at it.
And I feel very good about that, and we should all feel very good about that.
Yes.
God willing, we'll make room for everyone. And if not, there are plenty of new communities that are starting.
Correct. So I said that we were sitting here in Front Desk. So what is Front Desk, and how did you come to be here or own it?
Okay. So a couple years ago, I saw an opportunity, and I bought a business, which was Front Desk, a business center here in Modi'in, basically renting private office space to all kinds of different businesses, startups, organizations, freelancers, and it's been a lot of fun. I have a lot of amazing renters. I've met a lot of interesting people. People here doing really good work, hard work.
For a while, I was a renter for a few
Yes.
months before I realized that I have too much ADHD to sit in one place for that long. And before I also realized that Aroma, which is 2 minutes from my house, is free.
Yes.
So, and then...
I could give you all the reasons why the free Aroma is slightly different than what I'm offering.
I was just kidding. I was just kidding.
Wherever you're comfortable.
Right, I understand
medical
that.
startups here. People, I just wanted to, there's an aspect of this that I feel very...
Even without the studio.
Even without the studio, just being a part of people, innovation, Israeli innovation.
So there are high-tech companies here? Mm-hmm. So like what's
And
one of the
medical
things
startup,
that somebody's working on?
Revital Vision has been really leading the way in terms of correcting vision without surgery. And they've been written up in many journals and very, very successful. And, Debbie Garner from our community has a medical startup as well.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
So as long as we're talking about people and relationships, I should just go back a step. I didn't even ask you just to talk a little bit about yourself, before Modine and your family, just very briefly.
Such as
Where your
married
husband,
to Joey Hellerstein.
right? Your kids.
I have 5 wonderful children. 3 are married. I have several adorable grandchildren. My youngest son is drafting in a week. My sons-in-laws have been in and out. My son is in right now, a lot of that.
And where did you live before you made Aliyah?
We moved from Riverdale. I grew up in Teaneck.
And what made you want to make Aliyah? I mean, now it's very in to make Aliyah. Not in enough, but I mean, 25 years ago, it was a little harder and a little less popular. There wasn't WhatsApp, I don't think, 25 years ago. So what made you, want to be here?
From childhood, I would say, there was something about living in Israel that to me seemed very logical, given the fact that if you grow up religious and you're davening and you're learning, and it just, to me, the connection to Israel seemed like an obvious place to move if you're thinking about Israel and you're davening towards Israel. Even as a child, I don't know, I had some of those feelings. And I think I might have told you this once, that recently my 8th grade class has reunited over WhatsApp, which has been, I won't tell you how many years ago I was in 8th grade, but it's been a lot
How
of fun.
many people on the WhatsApp group?
It must be like 60. I think we were like 60 people. And somebody compiled the list in your yearbook of everybody's ambitions in terms of career-wise or whatever else is there.
Right.
And I really had no memory of this, but they're on the list. It said, apparently in my yearbook, I wrote that my dream, ambition, goal, whatever it is, was to live in Israel.
Amazing.
So
not that many
seems
people,
like-
not that many people say that they reach their life's ambition.
Well.
So you're very lucky. So let's go back to the Beineinu and the studio. I think we've talked about this several times, that you told me once a number of years ago that you had this empty office. People didn't necessarily want it because there was no window, I think you said, and this was a conference room. And eventually, skipping to the punchline, you decided to change this into a podcast studio where we're sitting right now. And I remember telling you at the time that I thought you were crazy.
Is that before or after you started your podcast?
That way before. I thought you were crazy. I didn't see how this could make money, how there were enough people that wanted a podcast, and you did it. So I want to ask you, what was I missing, or what were other people missing? Did other people tell you that you were crazy, and what did you see? Or was it just a hunch?
So first of all, I can't tell you that many people told me I was crazy because I really didn't tell anybody else. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't tell anybody. It was an idea that somebody floated to me. I don't take credit for the original idea, but I'll take credit for sort of being open-minded enough to be willing to take the chance and think that it could be very interesting and could, be a good idea for the space that I had and something different and unusual that I could do with it. I didn't know a ton about podcasting. I certainly didn't know the mechanics of it. And I brought in people who really, really know that stuff well to build it with me, and they did an amazing job. And basically, we opened as a pilot soon after the war started, which had its own challenges. But also, I think because of the timing, it ended up being a place where a lot of people continued to be able to come and tell a lot of stories and reflect and share memories. And that part has been really just incredible. I could not have predicted the kinds of people that would come and the people I've had the opportunity to meet. And people ask me a lot, like, do I have to be here all the time? How often am I here? And the truth is, I really don't have to be here so much. Thank God I have an amazing team, and they know what they're doing, and they don't necessarily need me for the technical aspects of running the studio.
But you want to meet the people.
Very often I come because I really want to meet the people.
Hear their stories.
Yes. So
let's start, before we continue with some of the things that you're bringing up now, because I'd really like to hear about some of the stories and what moves you and all that. Let's just start first with something more basic. Beineinu, the name.
Yes.
What is that all about? I mean, I know what it means.
Yes.
But...
So first of all, it wasn't my original name. I recently rebranded, which is a story in and of itself, which we won't get into necessarily right now. So the Beineinu name is about 6 months old. And
who thought of it?
I thought of it. And I thought a lot about names, and I did actually ask people to suggest names to me, and then in the end, it sort of just came to me, and I really felt, first of all, it was interesting because my original name we chose before we even opened, right? So we chose a name that we thought made sense, and I liked the name, and it's a good name, but it was before I had any experience actually being involved in the podcast studio or podcasts. And when I had to rebrand, I was really able to reflect on what is this place, who comes here, what purpose does it serve, and I really wanted the name to reflect what I felt like was happening. And Beineinu for me was very much about these conversations, right? So the conversations that happen between people, which on the one hand have sort of a feeling of intimacy between them. It's two people having a conversation. But on the other hand, it's a conversation that's going to be broadcast, if, hopefully to
thousands,
hundreds of thousands.
Right.
So the Beineinu is the conversation that happens between the people speaking in the podcast, and the Beineinu also is about what we're saying and how we'd like that to reach all the people, whatever it is, our messages, our stories, our wisdom, our Torah, our views. And I wanted it to be a Hebrew name, of course. If you look at, there are other podcast studios in Israel. I don't know if any of them, maybe a couple have Hebrew names. The vast majority have English names. It was important to me that it be a Hebrew name. People have told me it's a Dossi name. People have told me it's too intimate a name.
A lot of our listeners are not going to know what Dossi means, but it means too religious.
A religious vibe.
Right.
And I think maybe the fact that I'm not a native Hebrew speaker, those nuances are a little lost on me, but I can't say that it bothers me too much. I'm very happy with the name.
So I was going to go somewhere else, but I just want to take off on something you said. You said there are other podcast studios. Now, I'm not really familiar with the podcast studios. I come here, I do it here, and I love it. So I continue doing it here. But it seems to me from your Facebook and from things I'm seeing that you really have become the place to record podcasts in the state of Israel.
Wow.
Is that true?
I'd like to think so.
Right. No, I mean, you'll talk more about this because you're more familiar, obviously. But I see all kinds of people coming from all walks of life.
Yes.
Hebrew, English.
That's all true. Right. We get a lot of people. A lot of it is word of mouth. A lot of it is, we have a lot of politics. There are politicians that come, or newscasters or journalists that are coming from Channel 14. We're very close to Channel 14. So that's
close
definitely
geographically. Right. Channel 14 is here in Modi'in.
Yes, exactly. And I'd like to think that what we try and do here is very unusual in terms of the type of service that we provide and the atmosphere. And we're very hands-on, and we're very
customer service.
Exactly.
Right.
And we offer a lot. So
I want to go back to something you said when I asked you about the name. You said something about, I don't remember your exact words, but something about what the purpose of this place is. So I think that's really the ultimate question, purpose. I want to sort of play devil's advocate because sometimes I feel like, even while I'm doing it, but certainly afterwards, I feel like, okay, it's nice, I schmooze with people, interesting people, but at the end of the day, what is the goal of what we're doing here, of what you're doing here, what I'm doing here? Meaning, what is the goal?
So first, there's a quote that I like very much that says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I very much relate to that because I really feel when you ask why are so many people coming here, I do think that there is a sense that it's not just, we don't just record podcasts. There's definitely a why behind why we're running this business. And again, I can't necessarily tell you that it started with the why. The why really came after I opened. Some people open a business because, like, either they have a passion for the business, or they say, there's this huge gaping hole and there's a need, or they have. I opened the business because I saw an opportunity, and really the passion for it and the why sort of came after. And I really understand through doing this, for the time that I've been doing it, the value both in giving people an opportunity to tell their story. For example, there are a lot of people who say to me that they want to start a podcast because they feel a sense of shlichut. And they really believe that they have something because of something they've been through. And of course, a lot has to do with the war, but not everything. Things that they've been through, things that they've learned, experiences they've had, where they feel that they don't want to just hold on to that and keep it personal and private. They want to be able to tell the world, right. Not because they want to talk about themselves,
right, obviously.
Because they really feel like they could be helping other people. And every week somebody comes to me and says, a young woman recently lost her husband to cancer when she was 22 years old, and she has a young child. And she said, when I became a young widow, this is obviously before the war. Since the war, unfortunately, there are many young widows. I had nobody. There was nobody like me. And I want to start a podcast. And this is my shlichut.
Right.
And their shlichut becomes my shlichut, right? Like, I feel that sense of shlichut in helping them.
I know from my own podcast that most notably when I interviewed the Briefs, the parents of Yona, Hashem Yikom Damo, they also very much wanted to tell their story. So in what you're basically saying is that a lot of this has nothing to do with the listeners. Obviously, people want to tell their stories because they want people to hear it. But in many ways, this is a need that a lot of the people have
so that's
without
a different
listeners.
Need. I think the shlichut need is a need to reach many, many listeners because you have something you feel you can offer and teach. I think we have had many families who've lost children, siblings, and their need to talk about their child, I think, comes from an even deeper place, which is keeping the memory of this person alive, the accomplishments of that person, who he or she was. And in that situation, I think just telling the story, no matter how few or many people it reaches, there is something very cathartic and therapeutic.
Right.
And we continue to tell those stories. In fact, I think recently I wrote something about how I had started a board of stickers.
Right. We put the Brief sticker on.
So
Yona's
my
sticker,
board
right.
is full,
right.
which brings me very mixed emotions. On the one hand, it means that, thank God, I've had the tremendous privilege to host these people and give them a platform and help them and remember with them. On the other hand, like my the full board is, you never want to see
Say
that
no more, right?
Full.
Right.
I mean, and it's literally like a drop in what's
the bucket, right?
Many, many, many people.
So are you saying that this is more about the speaker and the podcaster than it is about the people listening?
No, I don't think I'm saying that, because the ultimate
That's
goal...
That's why I said, are you saying it, right?
No. The ultimate goal is to reach people.
Right,
That is the ultimate goal,
right.
to reach as many people as possible. Or
Right.
if you're talking to a specific niche, some podcasts are like very broad and they want to just reach these very broad, wide audiences. Right. And some of them are much more niche and they have a very specific audience that they're looking to reach.
So on that note, and you touched on it earlier, tell us a little bit about two things, about sort of the range and the different kinds of podcasts, because just from watching your Facebook page, it seems, quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And also maybe tell us some of those stories or interesting or moving people that you met, if you have.
Okay. First of all, the range is like huge. It's podcasts like yours talking about current events or current issues in Israel, podcasts in English, podcasts in Hebrew. There's politics, which we mentioned. There's Torah. There's business, there's movie reviews, there's music, there's health and wellness, there's really, like, the list goes on. We do a lot of podcasts also with families who just want to celebrate a birthday or an anniversary of a parent or a grandparent and come in and, want that parent or grandparent to tell their life story.
Beautiful.
Where children ask questions, grandchildren, we've done everything. And that also, I love being a part of those. It's just a wonderful thing to see a person really be able to reflect on a life and be able to answer their family's questions in real time and hear their voice and their inflections and the conversation. So I love doing those as well.
Tell us some stories about someone moving or a moving
Well, I'll tell you, this is an
episode.
interesting story. We have a lot of political podcasts, as I mentioned, and most of them tend to be more right-wing. As I mentioned, proximity to Channel 14, and maybe for other reasons, I don't know.
But you're more than willing to have anyone on,
I'll
right?
have anyone on,
Right.
yes. This is a business,
Right.
and I very much believe in, I don't...
Freedom of speech.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
I don't censor anybody.
Right.
I don't monitor anybody, anything like that. I have a very left-wing podcast here as well. And it just so happened when I was looking at the day's schedule, I noticed that Yariv Levin was coming as a guest on a podcast.
Right. Just for our listeners, Yariv Levin lives in Modi'in, right below me, by the way, and is currently the Sar HaMishpatim, the Justice Minister of the State of Israel, and was one of the main architects of the judicial reform, which brought about a lot of protests. That's putting it lightly. Right.
Bit of a controversial
Right.
figure, perhaps. So he was coming on a podcast, and right after him, I noticed that the person who hosts the very left-wing podcast was coming right after him. And I thought, okay, that's going to be very interesting. And I decided that in order to keep things friendly, I would wait at the front for my left-wing
Podcaster.
And when she came, I said, why don't we have a very nice lounge waiting area? It's one of the wonderful things about the place. Why don't you wait in the lounge, and I'll wait here for your guest. And she had very strong feelings that she wanted to wait for her guest, and she didn't want to leave that spot, and she insisted on standing at the entrance.
So you were going to have her go to the lounge while
think
Levin left, and they wouldn't have seen each other.
Exactly.
Right.
That was my plan.
Right.
She did not, I didn't tell her why that was my plan, but that was my plan. She wanted very much to wait at the front for her guest. I couldn't tell her not to do that. So I was waiting with her in the front for her guest to arrive, and I saw Yariv Levin had finished his podcast. He starts walking down the hallway. I look at her face as she looks at him, as she notices who it is, and I see that
Right.
I see what's happening to her
right.
face. And I'm thinking, oh boy. And as he leaves to exit and he passes her, she yells at him, "Busha, busha,"
Wow.
which is exactly what I did not want to happen.
Right. Which means embarrassment. You're an embarrassment. That's what she said, right?
And I said to her right away, you cannot do that here. This is my place of business.
Right.
And I said, I would never let anyone treat you that way or any of your guests that way. If anybody did that to you, I would tell them that it's just as unacceptable. And I have to say, to her credit, right away she apologized.
To him.
To me. He had already left.
Right. What was his reaction?
So it's interesting. He didn't seem to have a reaction, but I was too busy trying to figure out how to deal with the situation. The people that had him on as the guest, the next time they came, I asked them, did you notice? Did you hear her? And the truth is that they were engaged in conversation. They never even heard her say that. But she sent me a message later that day, apologizing again and telling me that she was 100% wrong and I was 100% right, and that when I told her that I would never let anyone disrespect her or her guests, she said she knows that to be true because she has brought some very also potentially controversial guests to the space. And, I treat everyone with respect and dignity. And she took notice of that, and that really actually meant a lot to me that she said that.
So I want to ask you a question based on what you just said. I still want to get back to the moving stories a little in a few minutes, but you said earlier, just a few minutes ago, in your answer that you would let anyone speak here. Is that really true? Meaning, is anyone allowed to speak here? Are there any borders? I know that when Bezalel Smotrich was here, I think you put it online and on Facebook, and some people had a problem with that, and you basically said more or less the same thing, right? That it's open-minded, anyone can speak here, this is a business.
Right.
So some people didn't necessarily like that. But are there any borders?
So it's a good question. I've had to think about that.
Let's say a Palestinian wanted to come in and sit in this seat and talk about that they don't believe that Israel should be a Jewish state, and this is a business. They're paying you money. Would you have them?
So those conversations may have happened,
right.
like on this left-wing podcast.
Right.
I think those were some of the people. I don't ask people what they're going to talk about when they come. So when she brings her guests, I don't know what they're going to say. And again, I'm not condoning or condemning what a person says. I would certainly not restrict like a SAR of ours from coming, even if I didn't agree with them.
Well, I think that
but I do think it's an interesting question.
Right. So here you're saying that you don't know who she's bringing, but I'm going to put you. Let's say somebody calls you and says, I want to start a podcast, and this is who I am, and this is what I want to speak about. Would that be something that you would allow to happen here?
I think I'd have to really think about it. And I think I'd have to be able to separate my personal feelings from, this idea of freedom of speech and tolerance, and where do you draw the line? Obviously, if someone's going to sit here and promote violence, I think clearly that would be a line for me. Right? Or promote any kind of racism. But that's also kind of vague, meaning...
Right. People would say that Batal Smotrich is a racist.
Correct.
People do say that.
Now, I will say that when I say that, I like to be here a lot because I like to meet the people. So there might be people that I would be very happy not to come and meet. But that doesn't mean I would restrict them, obviously, from using the studio or being a guest.
Right. At a rabbinic conference in America, in New York, around a year and a half ago, so I had a conversation with two of my rabbinic colleagues where a very right-wing minister of the government was supposed to speak in a certain location, and at the very last second, they canceled it because of all the protests. And I said that, again, these were people in America, not necessarily here, which I think creates a big difference. But these people are duly elected ministers of the state of Israel, elected by a democracy, and whether left or right, in my mind, that has to be respected. So.
Correct. And I would agree about that probably if it were America as well, meaning you have to respect the fact that they're elected officials, and
So tell me about some of the moving people, about some of the moving stories. And you talked about a lot of the war widows or siblings or parents or whatever it may be. So tell us one or two of them that particularly stand out in your mind.
So one that stands out is Talma Rantz, who's a widow from the war. She was a guest on a podcast. I don't know if you've ever listened to her. Here.
Right.
She's a very special woman. She's very inspiring. To hear her tell her story is so moving and powerful. And she talked about the day her husband was killed and what it meant to find that out and have to tell her two small children.
When was that? When was he killed?
So that must have been, I'm going to say around 2 years ago, more towards the beginning of the war. And it was very, tragic, very, very tragic. Recently, about a month ago, she came back to talk about her new husband and her second marriage. And there have been a few of those, and those stories also, the stories themselves are so powerful. The idea that, thank God, there have been many women who have found, a new life, new love, have been able to sort of try and piece their family somewhat back together, and what that means in terms of the husband that you lost. Those stories definitely stick with me. Iris Chaim was here and told the story. She's so inspiring. I was really honored to meet her. I mean, there are so many, the parents of the soldiers that were killed. And then we can talk about Roni Bluth, who started a podcast after her husband was injured. And she started a podcast with wives of injured miluimnikim, and how her daughter actually continued for the second season. Her
How old is that daughter?
10-year-old.
She's is she your
10-year-old.
She your youngest podcaster?
She is our youngest podcaster, except actually, no, we have Shira Amram had her son, who's about 5, on. They did like a pre-Pesach, but he wasn't the host. She's our youngest host, I would say. She was amazing, tiny little peanut with real ability to hold a conversation, and she interviewed daughters of injured miluimnikim, and I mean, I have so many so many examples of powerful, moving stories.
I want to ask you about one of them. I saw that one of your podcasts is somebody who's trying to break down stigma when it comes to mental health. So
Yes.
this is something that concerns me. I work on it in Barkai and with our Barkai rabbis, and especially over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, we've seen a real rise. I mean, that's the biggest understatement of the year in terms of PTSD and other mental health challenges. So that particularly interests me. Tell us a little bit about
so
that.
So she came to us. She wanted to start a podcast again, like from this sense of shlichut, that she is a psychology student, and she wanted to interview people with diagnoses, but in a very informal way, sort of, what is your life like?
Right.
And what is your day-to-day? And what are the challenges? And are there any benefits? And each episode is someone else with a different diagnosis.
And these people are willing to come on.
And she finds the people that are willing to come on. They're people that she knows or she's connected to.
I would tell you, just to interrupt for a second,
Yeah.
that as a pulpit rabbi in America for 10 years and then working in the rabbinate here, that the stigma issue is much, much worse by leaps and bounds in Israel than it is, or was in America, at least when I was
The
there.
stigma's worse here.
Yeah, much worse. Yeah,
Interesting.
so it's interesting.
Well, I wonder now if with what the amount of cases that we're seeing because of the war, if the stigma is hopefully getting better.
Right.
And I think that's part of what she was trying to do, was break that stigma. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, because I often say, it's a joke or half of a joke, that for our organization, sort of war, when rabbis know what they're doing and are able to help people, is like a good business. So war seems like it could be a good business here. And what obviously that doesn't sound good, and that's we don't really mean it that way.
There's no business like Shoah
right,
business.
Right, we're just making a joke.
Right.
But at the same time, is that what this is about? And will some of it come to an end when the war is over? God willing, maybe the war will never be over. Who knows? But is this more or less most of what you're doing? You said there were some other things, but is most of what's going on here about the war?
Well, it sort of depends, because in a lot of ways, everything becomes about the war.
Right.
There's literally almost nothing. There's no podcast. I have a podcast about banking, and
Right.
there was an episode about the war, right? I mean, the war has impacted and affected every facet of our lives here. So whether the actual topic is the war or issues around the war
Right.
come into the podcast, it's just what happens.
Right.
And I think it's going to be happening for a very long time,
Right.
because
I agree with you.
This is continuing, and I think there'll always be a lot to say. And I don't really see it as like this is a war-related business, like selling masks during Corona
Right.
kind of thing.
I want to change gears just a little bit. I see on my statistics here that in 2022, there were just over 1,000 Hebrew podcasts, and today there are more than 6,000 today. So you do a lot of Hebrew here, I believe, right? You mentioned that
Mostly.
before. Oh, it's mostly Hebrew. Uh-huh. What would you say the percentages are?
70-30.
Really? Wow.
70% Hebrew, 30%
Really?
English.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Israelis are much more into podcasts than us Anglos are?
In doing the podcast, I don't know about the listening necessarily, but in recording the podcast, I think coming out of Israel, obviously there are a lot more
Right.
Hebrew podcasts than English podcasts, although I do have a number of very good English podcasts.
Now, it says that a great number of them are Torah-related podcasts. Do you do Torah-related podcasts here?
Yes. There is a lot of Torah tochen.
Right. Like
first of all,
shiurim or what?
No,
or
not,
discussions.
No, more
right.
discussions. First of all, your podcast is also
Right.
touches on a lot of Torah.
Right.
Torah Noar does a podcast. Sulamot, Yachad, Bnei Kiva.
Do you recognize, obviously, forgetting the obvious differences?
Imatai is
right?
doing a podcast. They're touching
here,
on.
right?
They have offices here. They're
Right.
doing a podcast here. That's definitely halacha Torah related. Who? Nachon. Right.
So forgetting the obvious differences between, religious and non-religious, the person who's wearing a yarmulke, not wearing a yarmulke, do you see any difference in terms of the content or the style or whatever it may be?
Not
really.
necessarily. I mean, the general setup is it's either sort of more of an interview or more of a conversation,
Right.
and it could be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. we have this very nice table that can accommodate 4 people. We have the option of 2 chairs, which are like love seats, a little more casual. But I think the podcast setup, which is 2 people trying to have a very natural, authentic, real, non-scripted conversation, that's what people want to hear. So whether you apply that to Torah, or you apply that to business, or you apply that to politics, I think the idea is the same idea, which is let's just have a very real and authentic conversation.
So let me ask you another question about that. I often say this is also a joke, although it's really true, so it's not a joke, that I tell people that I had more Israelis in my shul in Kansas City than I do in Modi'in. So what I'm asking is, and we both know that you and I both live in somewhat of an Anglo bubble, and you're talking about both Hebrew and English podcasting. Is there any mix of the two? Meaning, would an Anglo ever interview an Israeli or vice versa?
Yeah.
It happens?
Yes, definitely. First of all, we have a business podcast on Swiss banking. Almost all their podcasts are in English, but they did want to interview an Israeli. I think twice they interviewed Israelis and did the podcast in Hebrew, and we have vice versa also. When we've had a number of different hostages who've come on. They're speaking English to English podcasters. It's not their native language.
They're Hebrew speaking.
Right.
Right.
Or they do it in Hebrew. There's like a mix of everything. I think people are very much interested in having the guests that they want to have, and they figure out, what language works.
Right. Now I want to talk about some of the larger issues than just, individuals podcasting interesting things from here. So we know that the same medium, that finally lets Israelis speak for themselves, right? This medium has given our worst enemies a platform, right, to do terrible things to us and to say terrible things about us that have really changed, many of the conditions that used to exist in this world before this war. Is that something you think about?
So first of all, I'm not in the business of publishing. I don't run a social media company. I'm not responsible for content getting out and controversial content in the sense that we do the recordings and you can post it where you want, how you want, when you want. And it's a little different than if, you're talking to, the Meta people or something like that. They have real ethical issues and real responsibility.
Right.
And thank God, I'm very proud of 99.9% of the content that comes out of this room. I can feel very good and very proud of. I do think, it's an interesting question not relating to podcasts, but I did think a lot about during the course of this war and watching everything, sort of when people appear on a show that's hostile to Israel or hostile to Jews, are they better off not appearing on that show and saying, I'm not going to participate in this and I'm not going to allow you to have a show? Or are they better off participating and saying, I know that millions of people are watching and there needs to be a voice out there that's telling another side to the story? Again, not necessarily related to podcasts, but it just as someone, involved in sort of getting information out, where do we want to be an active participant and where do we say, I don't want to have any part of that? And what's the pluses and minuses to that? There are pluses to appearing on the BBC, right? But
a lot of pluses.
A lot of pluses. At the same time, why should we agree to go on and be interviewed by someone who we know is going to be hostile, is going to possibly promote lies, and we're going to be a part of that?
Right. I think that it's interesting to me as I'm listening to you speak and thinking about a specific event from my past, that a lot of these issues were there before, and they're there historically. They just continue to come up in different environments. Meaning, I remember when I was a rabbi and somebody asked me to be on a panel, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with somebody who I detested their views, right? And it's the same thing. On one hand, more people will listen, more people will hear you and understand your viewpoint. But in some ways, you're a little bit legitimizing, who that person is.
Right.
I want to ask you a question about my own work. And how it may relate to what I'm doing here and what we're doing here right now. I hardly ever read questions. I do always have questions, but we all know that it never really follows because the conversation goes in different directions. But I do want to read this one. So I want to say up front that this one is not an idle question for me. My work is building community rabbis in Israel, and my argument for years has been that the kehilla, the Jewish community, was the great Jewish invention of the galut, of exile, and that when Israel became a state, it let that structure go. Right? And that's what we're trying to do in Barkai, trying to bring back that idea of community because it's so needed and so, helpful to people's lives in so many ways. That I wasn't reading. And then there is this. What you and I are doing right now. I sit in a room with one person and a microphone and reach more people potentially in an hour than most rabbis reach in an entire year. And the people listening are not a community. They are an audience. They owe each other nothing. I am not sure how to square those two things about my own life. So I want to ask you, because you have watched more of this than perhaps anyone, is the podcast and what Israelis are reaching for is the podcast what Israelis are reaching for instead of a kehilla? Is it a replacement? And if it is it good enough?
Okay. Wow. First of all, I want to say that in terms of Barkai,
this is not about Barkai. It's just more about the notion of community.
Right, but I want to just make mention of the fact that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Barkai because to have an idea and to, from nothing, create something, and to run that in the context of what's been going on in this country for almost 3 years is very, very challenging. I speak from personal experience, and I understand anybody who is running a business or leading an organization. It has not been easy to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to take you on the road with me.
Yeah. With all of our family obligations and demands and challenges. And so the fact that you've been able to keep Barkai going to the extent that you have, and doing your podcast, which is not as simple as people may think. It's definitely, a time-consuming, and it takes a lot of effort. And,
thank you. I appreciate all the comments, but I'm not going to let you out of answering the question.
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking if podcasts replace communities.
That's the ultimate question.
So, I mean, I don't see that at all.
Right.
I don't think that listening to something, even if 1,000 people are listening, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people are listening to the same thing, they create a community.
I think it's a little bit more nuanced than I may have made it. I don't mean that the listeners have nothing to do with each other. So obviously they're not going to be a community. But can sitting at home, listening to, 3 of the very moving and interesting podcasts that come out of Beineinu Studio every day for, 2 hours, can that's very worthwhile. But and the question is, can that replace a community? Can that prevent real community from happening? That's what I'm asking.
I don't think so.
Uh-huh.
I don't think so because you see in all different scenarios, people want to come together physically. I see that just in terms of networking events, right? I get invited to so many networking events. Why do we need networking events? Right. I can network on LinkedIn and through a million different mediums.
I mean,
a networking event is the purpose of the network. People want that face-to-face.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit there because when we talk about community in Barkai, because we try to help the rabbis, the Israeli rabbis who didn't really grow up in a community, understand what community is. So we literally talk about what is the definition of community.
Right.
And we're not going to go into that right now, but there are many virtual communities all over the world. And I just know personally, I'm sure you could say this as well. There are people that I've never even met, that I've worked with very, very closely throughout the years. And when I eventually do meet them, I feel like I'm closer to them than some of my friends who I am with physically sometimes.
But you wouldn't call them a community.
Right.
Like you'd call them a friend.
Right.
And I think a community connotes something much, much greater than that. It's more than just a one-on-one friendship.
No, but what about the stamp collecting the online community or whatever?
Right.
That's not a community. I agree with you.
I do yoga, and they talk about the yoga community.
Right.
What is the yoga community? I don't even know what that means.
Right.
I don't know what the stamp collecting. I mean, I think the word community gets used very loosely, in my opinion, and people who really are part of a community understand that it's so much more than that. It's the personal interactions. It's being able to be there for people during good times and bad times. It's the face-to-face. It's just so much more. So is there a podcasting community? I'm sure, there seems to be, you can label anything as its own community. But I have no fear at all that will ever replace
real community.
What we're building, what other people are building.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. I was just playing devil's advocate. There are some things that just cannot be replaced. I remember once, a number of years ago, when I was going to hire somebody or trying to hire somebody, and it was all being done, all the interviewing being done by Zoom and by all kinds of digital platforms. And eventually I just said, I need this person to get on a plane, or I need to get on a plane, and so we could sit in the same room, face to face, eye to eye, and agree on something. It didn't eventually happen, but I do think that the physical proximity has to come into play.
So that is the purpose of the studio. Like, meaning anybody could do a podcast over Zoom, honestly.
Right.
Right. So what does the studio offer you?
Right. Yeah, I think I didn't think about that, even though I used to do my podcast digitally over Zoom. But I think it's a very, very good point. So 2 last questions.
Yes.
Number 1, what is next? Meaning, do you have any plans, or are you just going to keep on? I mean, obviously what you're doing is great, but do you have any plans of expansion, or?
I have thoughts
that you're ready to share.
I mean, they're thought right now. I do. I have thoughts. I have ideas. Not really ready to talk about them in detail just yet. But you'll be the first to know.
Okay. The last question I want to ask you is,
as long as you don't tell me I'm crazy, or maybe you should, because
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you. I'll tell you a story that I tell people often.
Yeah.
My father, who was the general counsel of Johnson & Johnson, and some would call him his career a successful career. He managed thousands, actually more than thousands of people. So this is what he said to me throughout my life, and till this day. Right. I would call him up and I would say, Dad, I have a crazy idea. Right? And he would say, I love crazy ideas. Right? Now, 99.9% of the time, they may never come to fruition. But the 0.1 times where it does could be a Barkai or a Beineinu or who knows.
Well, it's not the idea. It's not the idea. It's getting from the idea, like Barkai, like Beineinu, to actually making it happen.
I'll tell you another, I probably shouldn't say this on air, but I'll tell you another story about that. I told my wife a few months ago, I said, you could say whatever you want, about me at my funeral. It's really fine. Like, if it's good, I'll take it. And if it's not, I'll also take it. I said, but this is the one thing I want you to say. I want you to say that I was crazy. Right? And everyone laughed. And the fact of the matter is that it's a joke, but it's only half a joke, because I think that in my life, I think I've been somewhat crazy, and usually, it's worked out for the best. So we shouldn't have to say that till after 120 years, but hopefully after 120 years, it will be said. I want to ask you one more real question, and that is, we've spoken so much, not only here, but over the past 2.5 years about the divide between what's going on here and what's going on outside of Israel, and specifically in our community in the United States. Now, without any judgmentalism, elitism, and any of that, I think anyone would have to agree that things are very, very different here, and in many ways, although it's becoming very challenging because of the anti-Semitism that we've seen even today or over the last few days. I think people would agree that in many ways it's been more challenging here over the past 3 years. So I wonder out loud, and I'd love your thoughts on this. So much of what's coming out of here is in English, meaning 30% is still a lot. And it's, how do you think it's being heard on the other side of the ocean? Meaning, do you think that it's being appreciated, as much as it would be or as it is here? And whatever, this affects all of us personally. You mentioned your sons-in-law at the beginning. You have 2 sons-in-law who've been fighting for hundreds of days. I have 3 sons who've been fighting for hundreds of days, right? It just is different here. And I'm not saying it's better or well, I think it's better, but I'm not casting any aspersions. I'm just trying to right. Ephraim would not be okay with that. Right. Rabbi Ephraim. No, I'm not at all casting any aspersions. Everyone should do what they need to do, at the time and place where they feel is best for them. But forgetting all that, I'm just talking about because this is about your podcasting.
Right.
Is what is coming out of here necessarily appreciated as much as it could be, on the other side of the ocean?
You're talking about the stories.
Yeah, I'm talking about the war stuff mostly. Yeah, the stories, the challenges,
and what their life has been.
Yeah.
I don't think there is enough coming out in English
Right.
in general.
Uh-huh.
I think we should be creating more content in English so that Jews all over can have a better sense of what, this country has been through and our perspective. And I don't know how much people there are listening. Like, have they lost interest? Do they feel they've heard it all?
Right.
They don't, it's too hard for them to hear more. Even if we did create it and put it out, is there an audience for it? And maybe that's really where the problem is. First, to sort of really understand, we're still living this.
Right.
And a lot of our sense, in a lot of ways, is that a lot of people have moved on. And even though, since, we mentioned Rabbi Ephraim, some people have really put a tremendous amount of effort into keeping that alive and, in the front and center of people's minds. I think it's hard work,
Right.
meaning I don't think it's not part of their life. You have to keep reminding them, and it's not easy, and maybe people don't want to be reminded. So I think those things go hand in hand, meaning maybe we should be talking about it more in English and producing more content. But at the same time, we have to really remind people that it's important for them to listen, and we need them, and their work is not done. And I'm not talking necessarily about Aliyah.
Right.
I'm talking generally, like, this feeling of, please don't move on.
Right.
Like, we need you.
We need you. Another question I'd like to ask you, Daniella, is an experience that I've had. I'm wondering if other people have had this experience, sort of as like an added byproduct of the podcast. I have met here some amazing people that I would have never met just in the halls waiting in between podcasts. I remember last time I was here, I met Rabbi Menachem Bambach, who I've wanted to meet for many, many years, and there are other people as well. So does that happen often? And is that something you'd like to take credit for as well?
I won't take credit, but it does happen often. I'll take credit in the sense that, thank God I created a space that a lot of people come and they've had the opportunity to meet. It has happened quite a number of times. In fact, a woman was here whose son was a hostage that was killed, and she was a guest on a podcast. And I had another guest who was coming also, and unfortunately they knew each other because both of them had sons who were killed as hostages, and they met here.
Wow.
And it was very powerful. They met by chance, and I was a witness to that. And that was very, very moving. And those kinds of things happen all the time. I mean, Rav Rimon, who you're very familiar with, who's always looking for ways to make the world a better place. And he's so incredible. He's been here a number of times, actually, as a guest on podcasts. And I know him. And he came one day, and he just said to me by chance, I woke up this morning feeling like I need to do more for the Miluimnikim. I don't do enough for Miluimnikim. He's doing amazing things for amazing groups of people. And he just decided today was the day he was going to try and see what could be done for Miluimnikim. He said, but I don't know how to find them. I don't know where to start. And by complete coincidence or not, I had lent my conference room, which I do often, to any war-related groups, support groups, anything that, people need a conference room, a place to meet, because we're in the center of the country.
For free.
For free,
Right.
yes. It's part of the business, but that's something that I do. A group of women whose husbands were injured as Miluimnikim were meeting in the conference room. And I said, you're not going to believe it, Rav Rimon? The exact group that you're looking for is meeting right now in my conference room. Why don't you come speak to them? And I'm sure they would love to hear words of chizuk. And he went in there, and they were thrilled to have him. And he sat with them for a while. Of course, he was late for his podcast, which threw my whole schedule off. So whatever, it was okay. And I made that connection between Rav Rimon and this group. And it was just, for me, another opportunity to help make good things happen. There's the story of you. Also, meeting wives of these injured Miluimnikim.
All right, I forgot that was
who,
here.
Again,
Right.
because they use the conference room to meet. I think you overlapped with them.
Right.
And
I met Roni Bluth, whose husband was injured, who I interviewed on my podcast that day. It was still pretty early on in the war. And then she started her own podcast, which you spoke about earlier.
Right.
Yeah, so I'll just say that chance meeting, as you say, just changed a lot for me, for us, meaning we helped, raise money for their organization, Chaverot Barzel, and we partner with them on many, many events. So, yeah.
It's an amazing thing to just be a part of, watching people connect who can help each other. And people have invited each other on each other's podcasts from meeting here, and they realize, oh, he would make a good guest, she would make a good guest. Connections like
Right.
organizations where, people
could
can
help
help
each
them in
other.
all kinds of
Right.
really incredible things.
I'll just tell one quick story that you remind me of with Rav Rimon, who said that he doesn't feel that he's doing enough for Miluimnikim. So first of all, I can't think of somebody in the world who does more for Miluimnikim than him. But on, I think it was October 10th, 2023, I had seen that Rav Rimon had gone down south to be with the troops and give them chizuk, as you said, with a few other Israeli rabbis. So I called him the next day, and I said that I think that some of the RCA, Anglo rabbis, me being one of them, would like to go with you. And we went I think it was either October 10th or 11th. And I'll tell you that the dizziness of the amounts of equipment and food, and I mean, it's very hard to keep up with a man like that.
He's
So
very special.
yeah, so it's an honor to be sitting in the same chair that he has sat a number of times. You have anything else you want to add that I didn't necessarily cover?
I think we covered everything.
Okay. Well, I want you, you gave me a lot of compliments, so not that this is, tit for tat, but I think that everyone here in Israel that's operating in this environment that we're in today is a hero in their own way. And what really fascinated me about this is that you have enabled so many people to tell their stories, the cathartic ones as well, and feel better emotionally. But even the ones, the other ones, you've given so many people a voice. And that does so many things, from creating more democracy to letting people learn new things, to hearing new opinions, to being open to new opinions. And I'm very thankful as a customer here, but I think, speaking beyond my being a customer, I think that anyone who is watching you and watching what's going on here and appreciating the work that's coming out of here has to be very impressed and very, very satisfied in terms of what they're hearing. So I want to, wish you the continued hatzlacha.
Thank you.
More and more podcasts. And anyone who's listening, like Daniella said, there's many, many, good podcasts out there, great podcasts out there coming out of Beineinu that should be listened to. I think you'll be moved by them and learn a lot from them. So I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone here. I want to thank Amit. And
you, Amit,
everyone should just have a
sure.
wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for joining me on Defining Moments. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star rating and a review. Please share this podcast with your friends who, like you, want to be inspired both by this period in Jewish and Israeli history and by the people who are making these defining moments happen. Let's not squander this unique opportunity. Maybe the next defining moment will be created by you or me. Until next time, I'm Rabbi David Fine.